Can everyone hear me with my mask on? Oh, great. The sound is wonderful in here. Thank you so much. Just quickly, I'm Stefanie Kostenblatt. I'm the Newburgh JCC Director and a proud partner in today's program. We've been working on this in-person hybrid event for 2 years. Last year we did a virtual event that was well attended and beautiful. But this year we're glad to offer the in-person component. And again, we're essentially doing 2 events today. One is over 100 people signing in online, so we want to honor that. And the other is us in the room, and we're very happy that you're here. COVID has taken so much from us, but in the case of this Remembrance program, it created an opening for a county-wide collaboration in partnership with West Point. As we take in the beautiful chapel today, we're comforted by the safety, not just knowing that the campus is secure, but also an appreciation of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, whose mission is to educate, train, and inspire the cadets so that each graduate is a commissioned leader of character, committed to the values of duty, honor, country, and prepared for a career of professional excellence and service to the nation. We sleep better knowing the institution is promoting a historic perspective that helps to prevent and defend at the highest levels. Thank you to Michael Guerin, whom you'll hear from shortly. He's in the back right now running tech, wearing many hats today. He's been our liaison on campus, and he's done a tremendous amount of work to make today possible. And the committee has worked very hard to bring meaning and capture years of Holocaust remembrance programs from the 4 corners of the county. And on behalf of them, we thank you all for being here today. Please allow me to welcome Elizabeth Solomon, the head of the Congregation Agudas Israel Ritual Committee, who will be leading our program with prayer service. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the program's organizers and to all of you for attending this important and meaningful event. It is my great honor and privilege to lead the afternoon service today in order to get us into a shared frame of mind and on the same page, even if we don't have actual pages to share with you. Please join in as you are able. Happy are they who dwell in your house. They will ever praise you. Happy is the people who have it so. Yes, happy are they whose God is the Lord. Ashrei yoshvei veitecha, od yahalelucha selah. Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo, ashrei ha'am sh'Adonai Elohav, tehillah leDavid. Aromimcha Elohai hamelech, v'avarcha shimcha le'olam va'ed. Bechol yom avarchecha, v'ala shimcha le'olam va'ed. Gadol Adonai u'mehulal me'od, v'li gdulato ein cheker. Dor ledor yishabach ma'asecha, u'gvurotecha yagidu. Hadar kavod hodecha, v'divrei niflotecha asicha. Ve'ezuz noratecha yomeru, u'gdulatcha asaprena. Zecher rav tuvcha yabi'u, v'tzidkotcha yiranenu. Chanun v'rachum Adonai, erech apayim ugdal chased. Tov Adonai lakol, v'rachamav al kol ma'asav. Yoducha Adonai kol ma'asecha, v'chasidecha yevarchucha. Kivod malchutcha yomeru, ugvuratcha yedaberu. Lehodia livnei ha'adam gvurotav, uchvod hadar malchuto. Malchutecha malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha bechol dor vador. Somech Adonai lechol hanoflim, v'zokef lechol hakfufim. Einei chol elecha yesaberu, ve'ata noten lahem et ochlam be'ito. Poteach et yadecha, u'maspir lechol chai ratzon. Tzadik Adonai bechol derachav, v'chasid bechol ma'asav. Karov Adonai lechol korav, lechol asher yukra'uhu ve'emet. Ritzon yirei av ya'aseh, ve'et shavatam yishma v'yoshi'em. שומר אדוני את כל אוהביו, ואת כל השעים ישמיד. תהילת אדוני ידבר פי, ויברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד. ואנחנו נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם, hallelujah. And the Kaddish to separate parts of the service. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah. B'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei decholei beit Yisrael. Bagala, bagala, uvizman kariv, v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach, le'olam olal me'amaya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran ve'alma v'imru amen. We're now going to the Amidah, which is the silent communal prayer. Please stand if you are able. We'll begin together, then because of time constraints, let's take just 2 minutes to pray and reflect. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol, v'Zocher Chasdei Avot, Umevi goel livnei v'neihem leman shemo be'ahava. Melech ozer ufoked u'moshia u'magen. Baruch atah Adonai, magen Avraham ufoked Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, mechaye metim atah rav lehoshia. Morid hatal. Mechalkel chayim bechesed. Mechaye metim berachamim rabim, somech noflim v'rofei holim, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato lishenei afar, michamocha ba'al gevurot, umidomelach. Melech memit umechayeh umatzmiach Yeshua v'ne'eman atah l'chayot metim Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hametim. For those of you virtually still standing, please be seated. Another Kaddish, the Reader's Kaddish, to again separate parts of the service. Yikadal v'yikada shmei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chayedecho be'Yisrael. Bagala, bagala, uvizman kariv, vimru, amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach, le'alam alal me'amaya. Yiparach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar, v'yitalev, v'yithalal, shmei dekutsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Titkabel tzlot hon uva'otchon, d'cho Yisrael, kodam avuhon divishmaya v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. And let's sing this part together in hopes of peace. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru, amen. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Please rise if you are able for the Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, Latet gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kigoye haratzot, velo samanu kamishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vigor aleinu kechol hamonam, va'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu noteh shamayim v'yosed haaretz, u'moshav yikaro b'shamayim ima'al, u'shchinatu zo, begovhei meromim, Hu Eloheinu ein od, emet malkeinu efes ulato, Kakatuv b'torato, v'yadata hayom v'hashevota el levavecha, ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim, b'shamayim ima'al, v'ha'aretz mitachat, Einod. Can you go? Kakatu b'toratecha Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol ha'aretz, Bayom hahu, Yihyeh Adonai echad, U'shemo echad. Please be seated. I did want to say that it was even more of an honor and privilege for me to lead the service because I am a second-generation Holocaust survivor. It's my honor now to introduce Michael Guerin, the Deputy Director of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at West Point, and Chaplain Fromer, to welcome you all.
Welcome, everybody. All our guests from the Jewish Community Center in Newburgh, and not just in Newburgh, but from a lot of different places, from what I've seen gathering, talking to a bunch of you. We're both grateful and honored to have you here today for the commemoration of Yom HaShoah. And I want to thank Stefanie Kostenblatt, who spent a lot of time with me organizing and putting together this event. A big debt of gratitude I also owe to Chaplain Frummer, our chaplain here at West Point, who also helped organize the event and open the Jewish chapel for us to use today. I also want to thank the cadets that are part of the Jewish choir here at West Point who volunteered to be here today instead of enjoying the nice spring weather we have. And a huge thanks to our VIOS team, Michelle and Bo, for managing the audio visual, for managing the AV. As you can see, it's challenging here, a lot of moving pieces, but we're up and running. And because of their efforts, we're able to stream this event to members of the congregation who could not be here in person. The occasion for today's observance is a solemn one. And it's solemn because we're here to pay our respects and to remember the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust, a genocide engineered by Nazi Germany and its allies. Indeed, it was a genocide unprecedented in both scale and in intent. Had Hitler's Germany not been destroyed in May 1945, the Nazis would have targeted every Jew. Literally, they would have targeted every Jew and every person of Jewish descent in any region of the world that they would have controlled. At the same time, however, Yom HaShoah is also inspiring. It was selected by the State of Israel as a day to commemorate the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in April 1943, the day to remember the hundreds of Jewish resistance fighters who rose up against their Nazi oppressors. That April, some 79 years ago today, the SS entered the ghetto in Warsaw, intending to deport thousands of Jews still residing there to the death camp at Treblinka. It came as a shock to the SS when they were met with a hail of gunfire that forced them to hastily retreat from the ghetto, leaving behind dozens of casualties. And for the next 4 to 5 weeks, these Jewish resistance fighters held off the SS, who vastly outnumbered and outgunned them. They held them off and made them fight for every city block. Crucially, though, many of you have probably heard the story of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Crucially, though, is that when they made the decision to fight back, when they took this decision to resist, the ghetto fighters knew that their cause was hopeless. They knew that they would not come out of this alive from the very beginning. Vastly outnumbered by the Germans, they could hope to defeat the SS. They could not hope to defeat the SS. There was no way out of the ghetto. The ghetto was surrounded. It was sealed off, so escape was impossible. They knew that by resisting, that by fighting back, it would not change anything. It would not change their fate, nor would it save the thousands of Jews who were still in the Warsaw Ghetto. At this point, there were mainly children, their mothers, and the elderly. It would not save them from being rounded up and being deported to Treblinka. What they fought for was Jewish honor, to show the Nazis, the outside world, as well as to later generations, that Jews also died as heroes during the Holocaust, not just as victims. This resistance was meant to preserve this narrative of Jewish heroism. It's fitting then that we commemorate Yom HaShoah today at the Jewish Chapel at the United States Military Academy, because West Point's approach to combating intolerance and preventing future genocides from taking place is also inspiring. Like other colleges around the country, around the United States, we're committed to teaching cadets the history of the Holocaust and other genocides and to honor and remember the victims. But here, I think, is where the similarities end. The Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at West Point was founded in the premise that the prevention of genocide is an achievable goal. And This might sound, like blind optimism and maybe even a bit Pollyanna-ish, considering, what we're all watching unfold in Ukraine right now. But we work with the men and women who will become leaders in the U.S. military, and men and women who are far more likely to confront atrocity and contend with threats of genocide than any other professionals. And for this reason, it is not enough that they simply learn the facts of history, not enough to examine the various cases of genocide and other atrocities that unfolded in our past and discuss what happened. Instead, here at West Point, our cadets examine why these tragedies occurred. They examine how they are conceived, how they are planned, and how they are carried out. Here at West Point, we analyze these horrors in order to understand them, to make them comprehensible. Cadets learn from those who resisted, escaped, and from those who survived. They also study the architects and the perpetrators of genocide, and perhaps even more importantly, the great mass of people who looked the other way and who did nothing, who did not react or act. This approach enables our cadets to understand the motives, the pressures, the time constraint, the use of misinformation, and often the competing interests of the various actors involved. And crucially, cadets immerse themselves in understanding the practical challenges of using military force to stop ongoing mass atrocities. We do all this to serve one goal: to prevent, or at the very least, to lessen the risk of genocide and other mass atrocities from occurring in the future, to stop them before they occur. All our courses and programming are designed with this overarching goal in mind: to inspire future leaders to think actively and creatively about prevention and to convert knowledge into action. We are committed to this endeavor at West Point. Our goal here and with the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies is to build leaders in prevention. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Chaplain Frummer.
Thank you all so much for being here for this very important program. It's an honor for the West Point Jewish Chapel to host all of you. My name is David Fromer. I serve here as the Jewish chaplain at West Point. And I just want to highlight kind of 2 points to speak to the significance of holding a program like this in the space we are in today. So the first, just in connection with West Point, you all know that General Dwight Eisenhower was, of course, the supreme commander of all Allied forces that invaded Europe in 1944 to end World War II. You probably know that he was a graduate of West Point from the class of 1915. But what some of you may not know is that an argument could be made that General Eisenhower really kind of committed the first intentional act of Holocaust education in the aftermath of the war, when he insisted that all of the soldiers serving under his command who were not actively engaged in fighting on the front lines tour the camps that the Americans had liberated so that they would see firsthand the effects of the Holocaust on the Jewish communities and, of course, on all the communities who were affected by that tragedy. I think it speaks directly to what Dr. Guerin and Stefanie mentioned about the core mission of West Point, to raise leaders of character, because Eisenhower, of course, was not Jewish. He had no personal stake in whether the Holocaust was known to the wider world or not, and yet he did kind of the right thing by insisting that his soldiers and as many people as possible learned what had happened in the Holocaust so that they would know and witness, and so that Germany would never be able to claim that this was misinformation or propaganda or anything like that. So in a sense, I at least feel a debt of gratitude to General Eisenhower for this decision that he made when it would have been just as easy for him to have not made that decision. The other thing I want to just briefly mention is the significance of this space. I think that one of the false lessons that might be drawn from the Holocaust, the outcome of the Holocaust, is that because Jews can never really be safe in any country they live in that is not Jewish, that there's really no need for them to risk their lives in defense of whatever country they are citizens of. Because we all know how the story of Germany's Jews played out from World War I to World War II. 100,000 of them fought for Germany in World War I. 12,000 of them died. 18,000 of them were awarded the Iron Cross for military service. And yet, it meant nothing when the Holocaust proceeded, and they were, taken to their deaths just like anyone else. And so from that experience, I believe that, people can draw the conclusion that, if that's what happened to Germany's Jews who fought for Germany, why should Jews fight for America or any other country that they live in? Because who knows, couldn't America turn on its Jews just like Germany did? Now, none of us can predict the future. None of us can say with 100% certainty that will never happen in England or France or America or any of the countries where Jews live relatively secure lives. But this chapel is a statement of hope that in spite of the risks that Jews may face living in countries that are not Jewish, we believe that military service in these countries is a value in and of itself. We do not serve in the U.S. Army and in the U.S. Armed Forces because we know that it will protect our families from a second Holocaust in the future. We serve in the U.S. Armed Forces because we believe it's the right thing to do, because we believe that in the present moment, when Americans are asked to defend our country, the Jews should step up and do their part to do that. And so this chapel built here at West Point, where the best of our country's officers are developed for future Army service, that they should have a place to nurture their Jewish identity and feel that their Jewish identity and their military service mutually strengthen each other, that serving the Army makes them more Jewish, and that their Judaism improves the U.S. Army, that they have a unique, something unique to contribute as Jewish service members and officers to the U.S. Army. And so as we sit here, I encourage you to consider that statement of hope, that through both Holocaust education, which is the purpose of this event, and through American Jewish military service, that we hope our future will be long and prosperous in this country, that we will live, as the prophet Micah foretold, and as George Washington famously quoted, each one of us in safety, right, and peace under our own vine and fig tree. So thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to the West Point Chapel, and I look forward to the rest of this very meaningful and important program.
The tattoo on my wrist, no longer a curse, but a memory I pass on so you, my beloved grandchild,
We'll never forget. We'll never allow forgetting. We'll always remember to never forget.
older generations, and you always will be the tree, the blossoming into perfection, strength, wisdom, my child, of everything possible.
This tattoo from a time impossible makes everything for you.
Older generations make everything for you.
A brilliant light of possibility.
A brilliant light of possibility.
We'd like to now invite the West Point Jewish Chapel Choir.
Thank you all for having us. West Point Jewish Chapel Choir has two songs prepared today. The first one is Open Animal, or the Parsons song, which was created during the first Sunday night on Wednesday. Never say that there is only death for you. The leaden skies may be concealing days of blue, because the hour we have hungered for is near. Beneath our tread the earth shall tremble, we are here. From land of palm tree to the far-off land of snow, we shall be coming with our torment and our woe. And everywhere our blood has sunk into the earth, shall our bravery and our vigor blossom forth. We'll have the morning sun to set our day aglow, and all our yesterday shall vanish with the foe. And if the time is long before the sun appears, then let the song go like a signal through the years. This song was written with our blood and not with lead. It's not a song that summer birds sing overhead. It was a people of untoppling barricades that sang a song of ours with pistols and grenades. So never say that there is only death for you. The leaden skies may be concealing days of blue, because the hour we have hungered for is near. Beneath our tread the earth shall tremble, we are here. Because the hour we have hungered for is near. Beneath our tread the earth shall tremble, we are here. Our second song is Eli, which was written by who was a Jewish character for during World War II. And she wrote many poems that are now created into songs to remember the sacrifices
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. The Zoom audience, can you please mute yourselves, everybody? Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Judy Ronay, and I am the daughter of Holocaust survivors. Before and after the Shoah, my parents lived productive, loving, and mostly joyful lives filled with family, friends, play, work, and hope. Much like the full life of our beloved Dr. Paula Neyman, whose memory we honor today. After surviving 5 concentration camps, 2 death marches, and the murder of her beloved 5-year-old sister, Paula, from Poland, found refuge and fulfillment as a physician in New York City. She later became an active member of our Orange County community. Paula and her beloved husband, Teddy, helped build Etz Chaim and organized and participated in religious services, fundraisers, and many cultural programs. Dr. Neyman spoke up against injustice everywhere and was a proud supporter of Israel. And of course, as a skilled and compassionate pediatrician, she healed our children and our families. We are so fortunate to be able to hear and see Paula retell her experiences, thanks to video recorded by the USC Shoah Foundation. Sharon Goldberg will introduce video excerpts, and we will also welcome Dr. Freda Neyman, who followed in her mom's healing footsteps as a pediatrician, and Serena Neyman via video from California. Paula's granddaughter will also share remembrances.
Good afternoon. The following video segments were selected from Paula Neyman's interview for the Steven Spielberg Foundation Shoah Project.
Do you consider your family religious growing up or observant?
On this scale of life in Poland, sort of middle of the way, but in those days in Poland, everybody observed. The degree of assimilation that is present in America, where some people will go to the synagogue only on major holidays, but the rest of their lives has absolutely no Jewish identity, was not in existence. Everybody observed holidays, even the non-religious things. I used to think that every little girl gets new Mary Jane patent leather shoes for Passover, and everybody was bringing presents on Purim and on Hanukkah. The general lifestyle was a lot more tied in with religion and tradition to that degree. How many people kept a kosher home? I don't know, but a lot more than now. The majority was kosher.
Was your family kosher?
Yes.
In the next segment, Paula discusses how life in Poland right before the war was similar to the United States.
At what age were you when you started to notice a change in your lifestyle with the advent of the impending war?
Oh, that was just in summer of '39.
What happened?
And that was a very nice summer, and I don't know whether I remember it so vividly because I was 12, and you start being a little less of a child, or because it was the last free summer, or because indeed it was that impressionable. But we were at a summer place, which was very much like here, you know, bungalows, day camp. One of the things that I feel prevents the Americans from understanding the Holocaust is that they don't really realize that we were the same kind of people that the Americans, the American kids are, that we lived the same way, that things were almost the same, certainly in 39, but even like now.
In the next segment, Paula describes both the systematic planning and the individual cruelty that occurred during the Holocaust.
Then one day, they surrounded the school and arrested all the kids and started negotiations for enormous amount of money and jewelry. The demands were met and the ransom was produced, and they were supposed to release the children on the marketplace.
Were you one of the children?
No, only boys went. They came up with a truck where the children obviously were there, and the people were waiting for the kids. There were some other cars, nobody paid much attention, and the kids started stepping off the trucks. And from one of the trucks, a hidden machine gun shot all the children. There were a good 40 little boys. The bodies were left for 4 days on the marketplace. The parents were not permitted to collect the bodies and bury them. This was the first example that was, I can say, that was more painful than the other things the Germans did. But every time the Germans speak about being nur ein kleiner Ja-Sager, that I was only a little yes-sayer, that they were fulfilling orders. The history of the war is so full of examples of individual improvised bestiality that was not part of the orders. I don't think, by now we know historically that the whole Holocaust was very well designed, written up, scientifically examined. For instance, they designed trucks that engineers have figured out where the weight has to be, how fast they can go. The trucks that were used to have gas inside, at what speed, how fast the people dive, with the greatest efficiency. It was the first time in history when total annihilation of one people was fully designed, administered, and executed as legal. But I am sure nobody's written down the story about get the kids, shoot them, and leave them for 4 days on the marketplace, lying without permitting burial.
In this segment, Paula speaks about the tragic capture and subsequent death of her sister and its lasting effect on her.
The 22nd of April of 44, has to be 44. Somehow the rumor spread that they are going to take away the children. There were about 4 children, smuggled out in various ways. I stuck my sister into a niche that was like a well around the chimney on top of the roof. And I told her to be quiet, and it was amazing how very cognizant the little children were of the situation of not being visible. Once one of the German SS girls found her on the floor. We used to try to keep them out of sight of the Germans, so that not to remind them of the children. And she said, "What is one sticken papier?" There was a little piece of paper that I picked up. Mama was the cleaning lady on the floor. They were so aware. The child sat without making a noise. The Germans ran around, called her name. They did not find her. She did not make a noise.
What, were you cleaning a house? Is that it?
No, the barracks.
In the barracks?
Yes. But we don't know how, because somehow they found her. Whether somebody saw it and betrayed her, I don't know. They found her, they carried her out, put her on the truck downstairs that was waiting. I was on the 2nd floor pretending to clean. I jumped through the window. I still have a big cut on the thigh because I wanted to go with her. But they just hit me with a bayonet, and I must have lost consciousness. I don't know. I saw the truck driving off and her yelling to me and to Mama, but she saw me. And all my life I felt that I failed her. The reason I remember, it was the 22nd of April. We arrived in the States on the 22nd of April, 47, but we never celebrated it because it was the 22nd of April. Later on, after the war, we went to Auschwitz, and we found her name on the wall. They were all together in that transport, about 10 children. Among them, the oldest was the 12-year-old niece of the poet Peretz. Her name was Anne Peretz, and she was sort of the leader, the caretaker. She wrote the kid's name on a wall, and the wall was in the barrack next to the ovens. So we pretty much know what happened to her.
Paula's advice to youngsters, actually, it is good advice for all of us.
You cannot give up. If you want it, you can get it. And I would like that message to reach the youngsters in America who have nothing to do with the Holocaust and never had any difficulty, that they should know that if they want something, they get it.
By working?
By very hard work, motivation. I mean, you give up many things, but you've got to work for it because it can be done. And I think that's very important. Another thing is I would like people to remember, see what can happen. See to what bestiality human beings can reach. But don't waste your life getting upset, getting angry, getting discouraged over minutiae. Only very few things are really important in life. Don't waste adrenaline getting upset over things that are not really terribly important.
In this last segment, Paula describes the hatred she continues to feel towards anything German, though she knows it's not a good way to live.
But I am not a full person. You would look at it externally. I am a positive, accomplished, contributing member of society, but I'm so full of hate. I hate anybody and anything German. I will never forget how they tore my sister out of my hand. I do not want to forget. I do not want to forgive. And that's not a normal human being. And that, to me, is a lot more unforgivable than even killing my family and everybody. Because it's like a mockery of the person that was permitted to survive. I know I can control it, and I often laugh at it. I don't use German products. I don't even take a ride in a Mercedes because the Mercedes people made the ovens. To the right of the entrance to the oven is the Mercedes emblem, and they knew what they were making. Does it help anybody? Does it take revenge? No, it only makes me feel better if I don't. But I think what it did to me is totally unrepairable. People should not carry hate for whatever.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me? I just want to remind the virtual community that everybody should mute. And I want to thank everybody. I appreciate everyone masking. In consultation with our county health commissioner, Dr. Dorfman.
Literally.
Since I am quite a distance from our audience, I'm going to take off my mask to speak. Thank you all for coming today, both in person and via the magic of the internet. And thank you for choosing to honor our mother, Paula Neyman, and for inviting us to speak today. I think of my mother every day. And I suppose that's not unusual, given the fact that I've gone into the same line of work as she did. But I feel that connection to her especially strongly around this time of year. She loved Pesach. She loved having family around. She loved the coming of spring that Pesach hearkened. It's called Chag HaAviv, the holiday of the spring. All the newness, the rebirth, the life force of the earth coming up, it seemed to invigorate her. And interestingly, as you just heard, it was the time of year that she and her mother came to the United States. She often would mention that fact at the Seder table. I was an adult when I first learned that it was also in April that her sister was taken away from her in concentration camp. And then many years later, in 1981, just days before Pesach, her own mother died. But despite the deep losses at this time of year, the joy of having her family surround her greatly surpassed her sorrow. It's always amazed me when I think about the periods of intense sorrow, terror, and utter despair that my mother endured during the war, that she had the ability to keep going, to push through, to maintain that drive to survive. And I often wonder from where she was able to draw that spirit. I spoke at her funeral about her sheer tenacity, and I think that trait was partially responsible for her drive, her ability to keep going. But I also think that she had an innate and often uncanny ability to keep laser focused on the future, on the importance of fighting for a future. I think for my mother, children were the ultimate embodiment and expression of future and of hope. So I guess it makes complete sense that she would dedicate her life to children. She had such a keen awareness that how we raise, educate, and nurture our children has a direct impact on the state of our world. I also think that caring for children, sometimes literally saving their lives, was a lifelong quest for her after the loss of her younger sister. A young life that she tried, but ultimately could not save. But I think there was also something else in my mother's soul that was healed by serving children. It was something that she used to call, as you just heard, her burden of hate. My mother often spoke of the fact that one of the most painful effects the war had on her was not from the intensity of the grief and sorrow caused by such profound and tragic loss. It was the fact that she was left with a searing and sometimes almost uncontrollable feeling of hate. I think, judging from the way she described this feeling and the look that would come over her face when she did, that it almost overwhelmingly terrified her, this feeling, this deep hatred that she carried within. And I believe that her way of quelling that terror, of dissipating that overwhelming feeling of hate, was to repeatedly, on a daily basis, immerse herself in acts of love, acts of hope, and of healing. Caring for children, both their physical health, as she did in her professional life, and their education, as she did in much of her volunteer work, was the soothing balm to her soul-searing pain. It reminded her that there was indeed a future. There was hope to be had, and goodness to be enjoyed, and love to be nurtured. And I don't think that it was limited to children. If you knew my mother at all, even just a little bit or for a short time, You knew how much she loved to connect with people and how much she loved to connect other people to other people. She loved to increase all the connections around her. And she reinforced those connections with acts of love and giving. That love, that relatedness, that caring, it was like a barrier, like a guardrail that reminded her that hate would not, in the end, win. Not on her watch. And if there was one thing that I think she would want us to carry on in her name, in her honor, the one piece of her legacy that she would hope would multiply in her wake, it would be simply that, to keep connected to one another, to foster that connection with giving, caring, tzedakah, and love. And in the world in which we find ourselves today, it often feels like hate might be winning some of the battles. So in Paula's honor, please, let's all do what we can in that regard to make sure that hate will never again win. Not on our watch. Thank you.
Thank you for those beautiful words. I'd like to turn our attention to Freda's sister, Serena, who is attending virtually today. She would like to say a few words about her mother as well.
Hi everyone, I have to be reading my script, so I'm hoping that you can hear me. My name is Serena, and I'm Paula Neiman's older daughter. First of all, I think it's a little bit uncanny. My sister and I we didn't talk about what we were going to write, and in some ways we've written the same exact tribute to my mother. I want to thank everyone involved When we go through difficult times, she would have told us we must fight hard to right these wrongs. We have to fight injustice in every way we can, because she was a real, true social activist. But she would also remind us that we have to seek joy where we can. We have to seek love where we can, warmth and connection where we can. We have to enjoy all the good things that life has given us. But this is a gift, and this will sustain us. Thank you so much for all being here. Your presence means so much to me.
Thank you. Dr. Naiman's granddaughter Martina would like to present virtually as well.
Literally minutes after my wife and I moved into our home behind the old building of Congregation Eitz Chaim on County Route 105, there was a knock on the slider door off of our dining room, and it was Paula Naiman there, welcoming the new rabbi and his family to the synagogue, and with a container of salt and a loaf of bread, representing the Ashkenazi Eastern European tradition of welcoming someone to their new home with those staples. She came, she dropped them off, she left hurriedly because she didn't want to be in our way and didn't want to intrude. That was just one of innumerable examples where Paula made her way into our lives and our hearts, and also made it clear that she did not want to occupy any more space than she needed to or deserved to. She was our children's pediatrician, gentle, wise, cautious, an independent thinker, but whenever I would bring my child for a checkup, There was always a 2-in-1 because she would be checking in on me as well, sometimes looking into my ears and my eyes to make sure I was healthy if I was looking particularly tired, and making it very clear to me that while she never wanted to intrude on my life and my time, it would be impossible for me to do that to her, because her capacity to show medical tender care was capacious and endless. She spoke in our community so often about her experience during the Shoah, the travails that she and her family went through, her finding love with Teddy, and building a life of joy and meaning in the aftermath of catastrophe. And to this day, it still hurts me to think that they never got the retirement that they deserved, because so soon after he retired, he became ill with Alzheimer's, and so much of those years was her taking care of him after he finished taking care of his patients. They were robbed of that, but no one could rob Paula Naiman of her spark, of her belief in the goodness of humanity, and in her, no one could rob her of her commitment to Jewish community, generations past and generations to come. She's sorely missed, and I will love her for the rest of my life.
So, after my mother moved to Orange County permanently, meaning not just for summers, sometime thereafter she developed a really deep and special connection that became even more special at the end of her life when she was ill, with the Bruderhof community at the Bellevale, near her home in Monroe. And we thought it would be especially important to hear from members of that community their experience of their relationship with my mother. So I'd like to call upon Dr. Kurtz, who very kindly agreed to come here today to share that with you.
Thank you, Frida, and thank you everyone for inviting my wife and I to be here today. And as Frida said, we're members of the Bruderhof community, a community that was just maybe 2 miles from Paula's home. And we're very close neighbors for 18 years, and I'm the dentist of the community there. My wife and I actually only met Paula near the end of her life, when she was already completely bedridden and could not communicate anymore with words. But Clem and Sarah, who are presently residing in England, Clem and Sarah Warren, were the first people from our community in Bellevale to meet Paula. And I want to read what he wrote down for this event, this memorial service. So Clem and Sarah write, "We first met Paula Naiman sometime in 2002 or 2003. Peggy Daly, who worked with her as a nurse for years in a pediatric hospital in New York City, introduced us. At first, Paula was very cautious because we and our community have German background and roots. After she discovered that our entire community had to flee Nazi Germany to escape prison and death, and here I would just interject that our community was raided twice by the Gestapo, the second time lined up against the wall, all the men, women, and children, and expecting to be shot or sent to concentration camps, but miraculously they were given 24 hours to leave Germany. And when Paula discovered this, she came for her first visit to our community. That was the beginning of a very meaningful friendship with her. She came numerous times to join our family for dinner, telling Jewish and Old Testament jokes, and showing a lively interest in each of our children. She would call every fall and make sure we and our children had our flu shots. Sometimes I would check on the snow removal that had been done and clean things up by her house so she would not slip on the ice. She would get very upset because she had paid someone to do it, and she did not want any favors done for her. She really became like a grandmother to our family. 3 times Paula came and told our students and young people about the shattering memories of Nazi occupation in Poland and her imprisonment in concentration camps. We heard, even years later, from many of these young people what an impression that made on them. Many times she told us that the hatred she still carried toward Germans was worse than the pain of her own suffering. We often prayed for her that she would find peace, and we did talk about it with her several times. A few times, we asked her if we could say a prayer, with her mostly for peace of heart. She always agreed. We did see her find a measure of that peace. Twice she asked us if we had anyone that could help her translate letters from the German government. The second time, we happened to have one of our sisters visiting from Germany. Paula agreed to come meet her, and they ended up having tea together after the translating was done. As she left, Paula marveled, "You have no idea what just happened. I had tea with a German." We continued to visit her when we could, till we moved to England in 2019. Often toward the end, she could not respond much, but loved singing and prayer. One of the last things she told us was, "You have no idea what you have done for me. Thank you, thank you." We will never forget our dear friend and neighbor, Paula Neyman, and count our family and community blessed to have known her. And as I said, my wife and I met Paula just 2 years before her death, and we were very privileged, and I say privileged with capital letters, to be able to offer Paula some much-needed bedside dental care. Someone who had been through so much suffering and abuse as a young child, and then used her life to do so much good for other people, and especially children, is certainly deserving of all the loving care we can give, and can only be highly respected. We are confident that she will have her eternal reward. She truly lived out the great commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Thank you to the Neyman family for your trust and your friendship, that we could be included so much in your family. Thank you.
Please turn your attention to the 2022 Holocaust Memorial Video.
Good afternoon. My name is Wendy Cedar. I'm the director of the Jewish Federation of Greater Orange County. I'm honored to be here to help support this program that both looks back and looks forward with hope. Candles have a special meaning to us in Jewish life. We light them during celebrations and in times of mourning and reflection. Our eternal light, or Ner Tamid, representing the ever-presence of God, began as a burning flame. Today, we will light one candle per million Jews lost in the Holocaust. And we've invited representatives from all over Orange County to help us keep their memories alive. So for candle number 1, we invite representatives from Monroe Temple Beth El and Dr. Naaman's own congregation Eitz Chaim and the Monroe area, and families of other survivors from the Monroe area to light the first candle. Thank you. Representing Temple Beth Jacob, Congregation Agudas Israel, and the Newburgh area, we invite Rabbi Jacob Brosner and the families of survivors from the Newburgh area to light the second candle. Thank you. Representing Temple Beth Shalom, B'nai Torah Shul, and the Florida and Greenwood Lake areas, we invite Rabbi Rebecca Schinder and families of survivors from the Florida and Greenwood Lake areas to light the third candle. Thank you. Representing Congregation Beth Hillel and the Walden area, we invite Cantor Nava Herzog and families of survivors from the Walden area to light the fourth candle. Thank you. Representing Temple Sinai and the Middletown area, we invite Rabbi Emily Cobert and families of survivors from the Middletown area to light the fifth candle. Thank you. For the sixth candle, we invite Brendan Coyne from Senator James Skoufis's office, other elected officials and dignitaries, and committee members to light this candle. Thank you. As we know, it wasn't just the 6 million Jews that were murdered in the Holocaust. There were at least 5 million Gentiles as well. I just learned today that the Bruderhof community was part of the communities that were unsafe during that time. Some that were killed were from other groups deemed less than human by the Nazis. Others were righteous Gentiles who risked their own lives and the lives of their own families to save people they did not even know. Today, we invite Pastor Peter Rustico from St. John's Lutheran Church in Middletown to light a candle on behalf of those righteous souls lost. Thank you. And with the candles in our midst, we'll just take a moment of silence.
It is indeed a blessing to be here today. The other hat that I wear, along with pastoring my congregation, is for the last 8 years, I've been the president of the Greater Middletown Interfaith Council. And for 53 years, that organization has been a partnership of Temple Sinai in Middletown and a whole variety of Christian groups, Protestant, Roman Catholic, and Orthodox, more recently, Islamic and Buddhist. We like to joke that we don't talk about religion, but instead we talk about what God compels us to do in the community. One of the things that God has compelled us to do in the community is to stand with our brothers and sisters. For example, on the week that the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh was attacked, all of the clergy in the Middletown area gathered for Sabbath services at Temple Sinai. When the Muslim community somewhere was victimized, we all gathered there with the rabbi for their Friday Sabbath services as well. It is, I think, most important that Gentiles, non-Jewish people, be educated in the events and the reality of the Holocaust. Brief story. I'm a Bronx boy. When I was 12 years old, we moved out of the Bronx. We moved up to northern Westchester, and I became fast friends. I was 12 with Michael Abramson across the street. And I didn't know many people, so he was like my bosom buddy for that summer. And I remember one day we played outside because that's what you did in those days in 1968 when you were 12. And Mrs. Abramson asked, Peter, would you like to stay for lunch? And I said, well, I can run over. She said, no, I'll call your mother. I'll make sure it's okay. So she was in the kitchen fixing lunch, and she had Michael and I seated at the table. I was a very precocious 12-year-old. And I noticed immediately there were numbers tattooed to her wrist. And I think she tried to hide it because she probably, in hindsight, realized it maybe wasn't her place to explain what they meant. But I was persistent, even then. And Mrs. Abramson explained to me that she had been from Poland, and she explained that her whole family had ended up in this place I had never heard of, called Auschwitz, and that she spared me the details at 12, but that only she and her sister survived. I went home, told my mom and dad about that, and they said that was absolutely true. And I think it's incumbent upon Jews and non-Jews alike to be truth tellers, to go to Yad Vashem, as I've been able to do twice, to go to the museum in Washington, D.C., to tell the story. When people deny the reality, to simply tell them the truth. It is an honor to be here to remember the blessed memory of those whose lives were taken from them. I know the slogan is never again. That, I suspect, is more of a prayer than a reality. When you see the events of Ukraine, Rwanda, you name it, humanity's capacity for inhumanity is great. But as has been said here in so many different ways, love is still greater than hate. And I thank you for keeping this memory alive and allowing a Gentile to be part of your observance. Thank you. And I have to read something, I think, also, or Roberta Baum would never forgive me. This is actually from a Lutheran pastor, one of those righteous Gentiles from Germany. It's rather familiar, and I think it speaks the truth. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. We are one people under one God, and that God compels us to stand together. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Rabbi Rebecca Schinder of Temple Beth Shalom in Florida, New York. And I thank my son Jacob for escorting me on this beautiful bima in this extraordinary sacred space with this amazing community gathered here in this sacred space and connected to us virtually as well. We offer now Elie Wiesel's juxtaposition of Kaddish Yatom, Kaddish L'Yom HaShoah. I ask that you please rise. Yit Gadal Auschwitz, V'yit Kadash Lotz, Shemei Rabbah, Ponar, Be'alma Divra Chirute, Babiyar, Vayamlich Malchute Maidanek, B'chayachon uvyomechon Birkenau, V'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael Kovno, Be'Allah uvizman Kariv, Janauska, V'yimru. Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah Mivorach leolam olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach Theresienstadt, v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman Buchenwald, v'yitnaseh v'yithadar Treblinka, v'yit'aleh v'yithalal Vilna, Shemei de Krubisha Brichu, Bergen-Belsen, Le'ela Mauthausen, Min kol birchata v'shirata Dachau, Tushbechata v'nechemata Minsk, Damiran Bialma, Vorsa, v'yimru. Amen. Together. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Please be seated. It is my honor to now invite the Naaman family up to kindle the eighth light, the eighth candle in the spirit of hope.
Shalom, everyone. My name is Nava Herzog, and I'm the religious leader of Congregation Beth Hillel in this little town called Walden, New York. I'm here to sing Hatikva. With me, I carry my mother's handkerchief. I am the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, and my mother had the privilege of listening to Hatikva in Israel after having surviving impossible atrocities and losing most of her family. So in her honor and all those who are lost, and for the hope of all those who are living in strength and in tzedakah and in goodness and kindness, please rise for Hatikva. Kolot balevav penima efesh Yehudi homiya ulefatei mizrach kadima ain letzion Sophia, od lovda tikvateinu, hatikva bat shnot alpayim, liotam chofshi be'artzeinu, Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim.
Please join me in a show of appreciation for our committee members, clergy, West Point staff, and Jewish agency leadership for making today's program possible. We share so many personal connections to the Holocaust here, and though painful, the work of this Remembrance program paves a pathway of hope and memorialization in spite of what happened. In many ways, that is Paula's story. I want to thank the Naiman family for sharing her with us today, and Freda in particular for traveling to us. We will conclude our program shortly, and when we do, we'll start a bus loop back to the public parking lot. Please be patient while we conduct the exit. Our first group will leave shortly following these remarks. I think the committee was really hoping that this program would speak for itself, and I think I represent everyone when I say that it did. The contributions here today were truly beautiful, and I couldn't ask for more than what we had here today as a community. So thank you all so much.